We are going to be talking about turbo kits today. This is Rick, I'm Mickey, and this is Evan. If you don't already know, this is Evan from Throtl. And yeah, so turbos, I'll pick back up kind of where we left off. We're talking about if your car came factory with a turbocharger, or if you have a car that's naturally aspirated and didn't have a turbo, if you could add one, and what you needed to do to make that happen. The first thing that we discussed was actually when you do decide to turbocharge, checking the status of your engine. So a leak down test, make sure that it's capable of actually holding the boost that you're the additional horsepower that you're gonna push through it. So yeah, so the next step would be what, Evan?
Well, hold on. Leak down, compression, do general maintenance. You don't want to turbo a car that has check engine lights or that's leaking a ton of oil and all that stuff. So make sure the car is running well before adding any type of forced induction, supercharger, turbocharger, nitrous, whatever, because it's only going to make it worse, right?
Right.
It's only
You're adding problems to problems, basically.
Yeah. So once you got your maintenance kind of checked out, the car is running well, the next step is research, right? Look to see what kits are available for your car, what type of brands support your platform. There's some cars that may not have any turbo kits available. And you can turbo those cars. It just requires a lot more research and understanding what parts to get, what parts not to get.
Yeah, I mean, basically you got to build a custom kit for those types of applications.
Like people ask us, I'm trying to think of what's a weird one. I don't know, let's say PT Cruiser turbo kit or a Kia Forte. There may not be a turbo kit that exists. So, those you can do, but it's going to require a lot more, research, a lot more money probably, and a lot more time. So, actually, let's stop right there on the money portion. So, how much does a typical aftermarket turbo kit cost?
I would say if you're gonna buy all the bits that you need to do it, you're gonna be in the $3,000 to $5,000 range, and that's before any issues arise. Once you've got it installed and maybe realize that something else is wrong with your car before you throw a boost at it, like clutch or transmission.
Yeah, I could agree with you on that, Mickey. I'd say there are some low-cost alternative kits out there, but by the time you factor in everything outside of the turbo, the manifolds, the intercooler, all those pieces, you're gonna be in the $3,000 to $5,000 range at the low end. Now, if you go for a high-end aftermarket kit for your car, I mean, you could easily have $10,000 into turbocharging your car.
Yeah, so don't take that lightly, and you may be able to buy some jank setup online for $400, but it's not going to include everything that you need, and you're better off saving your money, doing your research, and getting it done right, as opposed to having to fix your car all the time.
So I'd like to talk a little bit about the stuff you need besides the turbo kit.
Okay, that's a good idea.
Mickey touched on clutch and doing a clutch and a flywheel, right? And making sure your transmission's good. Yeah. But there's so many other things that you need to do outside of the turbo kit.
Oil cooler.
Sure.
Everything's gonna run hotter. You start pushing more air and fuel and spark into the engine. So you need to make sure that all the ancillary things are up to snuff too. So the cooling system, water cooling system, your oil cooling system, and everything basically around the engine is going to be running harder than it was before. So if those things aren't in order, you may end up with bigger problems than you started with.
Yeah, and I mean a good example is a clutch, right? Your clutch, your factory clutch and pressure plate, especially if you have an NA car, a car that didn't come from the factory turbo. I mean, you'll be lucky if your clutch can handle a 30% power increase with your existing pressure plate. So every time you do a turbo kit, pretty much, you should already be looking into upgrading your clutch.
Yeah. What other things do you think? So clutch, what other things are mandatory that you would need to upgrade?
I mean, without a doubt, your fuel system, right? Especially if you're talking about an NA car.
Yeah.
You're not gonna have fuel at the, to account for the additional.
So clarify, so that's starting at the fuel pump, at the fuel tank or wherever it's at.
Upgraded fuel pump.
Fuel line should be fine if it's a newer car. Fuel rail, potentially, larger fuel injectors, and probably some sort of meter. at the rail, so you know how much fuel is actually being put into the engine.
Right, and then what goes along with increasing your injector size is you need something to control this additional fuel. So, I mean, I remember back like on OBD1 cars, like early Acura Integras and Hondas and stuff like that, people were turbocharging their cars with like an SAFC, so they were controlling the fuel with like this.
Yeah, so we're talking about
like
tuning, right? So you're adding forced induction, you're adding more fuel into the engine, and you have to be able to adjust the levels accordingly, essentially, to adding all this horsepower. So you need to have some type of solution to tune your engine. Rick mentioned kind of a piggyback system like a SAFC or VAFC that's made by Apexi. And then you can also do standalone ECUs, right? AEM, Motec. I mean, that's where the cost gets up higher. So let's take a second. Let's answer a couple questions here. I see them kind of flying in. How's the quality of the stream, guys? Shoot a message in there if it's okay.
It's hard to read.
Yeah, I can read them from here. What if I already run? I can already run E85. Still need to upgrade?
On the fuel side, yes. Actually, E85 takes even more flow. You even need more fuel. E85 is not. It's not as high. It's higher octane, but you need more flow. You need actual more E85 fuel to sustain.
Should I turbo my automatic non-turbo 2JZ IS300?
No.
No? Yes.
I would say yes.
Yeah.
Honestly, though, guys, for the money that he's going to spend to do that, you could probably get a 2JZ GTE turbo motor and avoid a lot of hassles. So
it would be.
That's why I say no. You can do it.
It's a pretty easy swap.
It's no problem to turbo that engine. I believe some of the internals. Most of the internals, I believe, are the same, other than the head.
And the intake manifold's the big thing that's different.
So, my opinion, and what I would do is I would actually just swap the engine to an actual turbo motor instead of investing the money into all the bits and pieces that you need to make it a turbo motor.
Yeah, but hold on to that NA block because
you may need it.
You may need it.
So Peter had a really good question or comment. He basically said it all depends on what the owner is trying to do with the car. So we can even back up. That's probably the first question is, do you want a car for the drag strip? Do you want a car for, circuit track? Do you want a car for drifting? Do you want a car for daily driving?
I just want a car to do skids.
Okay, well that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
But if you don't even know what you want to do with it, or if this is your only form of transportation,
you probably shouldn't be thinking about
it may not be your best idea to throw an aftermarket turbo kit on it, because the bottom line is you're adding a lot of different parts that did not come with the car originally, and the chances are your car could be down or could have problems. So you gotta think about that.
Absolutely. I mean, I'll tell you, I have a 1990 Porsche 911, so pretty old school technology, and we put an aftermarket turbo kit on that car, and we took the factory horsepower was about 250 and we raised it up to about 400 on pump gas, and the car is not nearly as reliable as it was when it was stock. I mean, it's still a car you can get in, you can drive, but there's just more components you have to worry about now, right? There's more stuff that never came from the car, from the factory.
And more monitoring that you have to do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So gauges.
We got like 2 more questions and then we'll kind of get back. So Benjamin Lascar, actually I just emailed you back, buddy, but you said what would be a better thing to do for a 100% stock car? If you're not trying to turbo, what other alternatives are there?
I mean, that goes back to the video that you and Rick did last week, and that's the intake, the header, the exhaust, all the easy things basically that you can do to increase horsepower. Of course, for aesthetics, suspension, wheels, brakes, all that stuff. But for a power adder, you want to start with the intake, header, exhaust, and then build off it from there.
Yeah, and one thing that we probably should touch on, since we are talking turbo kits, a lot of people ask like, why turbo over supercharger or why supercharger over turbo? You know, superchargers tend to be, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong here, but in my experience with it, superchargers tend to be more reliable. I think it's just a little bit more, it's a simpler system, right? Like everything just seems to be a heck of a lot easier. It's more controllable. There's less, I guess there's less components in a supercharger kit. Most of the time you don't have an intercooler. You know, sometimes you have an aftercooler, but I'd say
they use power to make power.
Exactly.
That's what kind of the downside to a supercharger. But the nice thing about a supercharger is the power that it's making is always on demand. Mm-hmm. So when you hit the gas pedal, you're already making that power. With a turbo, you have to wait for the exhaust gases to build up and spool the turbo, and then the power comes on. And with the turbo system, there's a lot more inherent heat involved. So supercharger system runs a lot cooler. So there's a lot of pluses and minuses to weigh what's better for you. I think for a daily car, a supercharger is probably better.
The other thing about the supercharger kits, there's not as many of them, and it seems like the supercharger kits that you come across, it's very all-inclusive, right? One company will pretty much make every component to it. I remember Jackson Racing superchargers, right? They maybe a little bit heftier of the price tag when you buy it, but it comes with the injectors, the charge pipes. Exactly. It comes with everything.
Even the fuel system too. Yeah. So there's just so many, I guess, different items you have to take into consideration when you're building a turbo kit, rather than a turnkey supercharger kit.
I see a question, is a supercharger cheaper? No. You're going to be in about the same ballpark price range, a $3,000 to $5,000 sweet spot for any type of forced air induction that I've ever been involved with. So definitely, if you're seriously thinking about upgrading to a turbo or supercharger, definitely save your money and do it right the first time.
Yeah, so actually I wanted to kind of touch on that base right now, which is how long should you anticipate installing an aftermarket turbo kit on your car? Like how long would it take from start to finish of a project? Because it never seems to go. It never seems to go as planned, right?
Never. Yeah, you see that picture of all the bits in front of you, and you're like, okay, I know where all this stuff goes, but it never goes that smooth. And the kits are always okay. The kits are never. Well, I shouldn't say this. It's not that they're never great. What it seems to me is the less money you pay for your kit, the more work you have to do on the back end.
Absolutely.
So take that into account. If you're buying a turbo kit for $1,500, you're probably gonna spend another $2,000 on a fabricator and all these other things to get it to work the way you need it to work. Or you could spend the money up front and get a kit from a reputable company that has test fitted and installed many of those kits, and they know that it goes right in, and it's something you can do over the course of a week if you have the time. So again, just because you're saving money in the front doesn't mean you're going to save money in the long run. In fact, it's usually the other way around.
Yeah, and time too. I mean, time is money, right?
Time is money.
Buying a kit from a reputable company that has tons and tons and tons of tried and true R&D and
instructions
and an instruction manual makes a huge difference.
Yeah, so one company to me that comes to mind is Greddy. Greddy's been around forever, and they make turbo kits for a ton of cars, and there's a ton of support, I guess what I'm trying to say is, and they are pretty all-encompassing as far as they provide you with everything. So that's one company for sure that I would recommend, and I've seen those turbo kits on all sorts of cars, so good on them for putting that together. And there's tons of other companies as well.
Hey Cody, I see you're asking about Pro Chargers, and that's basically just a supercharger. It's just a different type of supercharger. So yeah, it works similar to the way a turbo works, but it's belt driven.
Cameron's talking about drifting his Integra, and I don't think that's going to happen, buddy, because those are front-wheel drive. So,
well, I actually have seen a rear-wheel drive Integra.
He said he's going to buy his brother's Integra. Would it be good to turbo? Those are two different questions.
Yeah.
It's a great car to turbo.
Yeah,
awesome car to turbo. I had a turbo Integra, and I loved it. They are a ton of fun turbocharged.
We got another question. He's going to put a bigger turbo on his diesel truck. Is it going to affect the miles per gallon?
I'm out.
If you're worried about the miles per gallon when you're increasing horsepower and torque, you shouldn't even be in this chat right now. So, I mean, my current car doesn't get that terrible of gas mileage, but my last turbo car got like 17 miles to the gallon. Your car, well, how's your Porsche do?
10 miles to the gallon.
Yeah, and I think TJ's is about 12 or something like that.
Is that E85?
Supercharged on E85. So, gas mileage is definitely not a car enthusiast's priority.
Supercharger?
Still pretty bad. Anything when you increase the injector size, you're gonna lose your fuel
Well,
efficiency.
as what I've found as an enthusiast is as you add horsepower to your car, your right foot gets heavier too. So that,
Yeah,
that,
so
that
true.
doesn't help with gas mileage because
That's so
you're driving
true.
around town trying to get after it everywhere you go.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
It's nice to hear those cool turbo and supercharger sounds.
For
All
sure.
right, so we talked about the cost.
I think we should talk about like different applications for turbochargers. So like, what kind of turbo would you run for a drift car, or you know?
Okay.
Yeah. What's size range?
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That's a good topic.
Yeah.
Well, I'll speak to the drift part. You guys can talk about the rest. Typically, in a drift car, you want kind of a smaller turbo because you want it to spool up as quickly as possible at the lowest RPM possible. Well, not possible, but at a lower RPM. That way, when you're on and off the gas for drifting, you have immediate response. Superchargers work great for drifting because of that. You know, obviously for drag racing, these guys can speak to that. I've never been a big drag race guy, but I assume the bigger the turbo, the better. And
Exactly.
back to drifting, a lot of the guys that run in the Pro Formula D and some of the Pro 2 guys are actually running nitrous oxide in a small window switch at the bottom of the throttle pedal engagement, so that as soon as they get on the gas, they're actually spraying nitrous to get the horsepower up, and then as the turbo exhaust gases get built up and the turbo kicks in and the power starts coming out of the turbo, the nitrous actually turns off. So it's kind of an assist, so to speak. So
Interesting.
maybe, I don't know if they're doing that in drag racing or not. Maybe you guys can do that.
Yeah, I mean, people run nitrous and essentially you use nitrous to spool up a bigger turbo.
Right. In the drag racing scene, it's all about big turbos. You see like all these 2Js running these massive
100 millimeter plus.
yeah 100 millimeter baby eating turbos, and you know 1200 horsepower at the top end. But the spool on those things is pretty dang slow. So as Mickey was saying on the drift side, a lot of these guys use nitrous to spool up those big turbos.
But for me personally, like if I were to turbo my M3, I would go for something on the smaller size because, you know, turbo lag can be cool, I guess. But if you have a big turbo and you don't have a lot of displacement in your motor, you're not going to make power till really high in the power range, the power band. And you know, it's cool because it kicks in pretty hard, but it's not as usable. So I like kind of a smaller turbo setup so that you can start building boosts, maybe 3,000 to 4,000 RPMs, and really have a little bit more fun with it, I think.
Yeah, and have you guys got any questions from people about like I want to twin turbo my car, or I want a single turbo?
Okay, yeah, let's talk about that. What's the purpose of twin turboing a car?
Twin turboing, you know, typically in like a V6 configuration, you have one turbo on each of the manifolds, right? But I mean, the real added value there is that you can spool a lot faster. I would say that going on a single turbo, because there's so many like modern ball bearing turbos and stuff, you really don't get a lot of value to doing twin turbo these days. I'd say like for the most part, going single turbo is an efficient way to go. I mean, what do you think, Mickey?
Unless you're running like the big LS, I see a lot of those guys running twin turbo stuff. Like people are running.
If it's a V configuration motor and you're using manifolds that actually link together with one turbo, then I think that those are actually a better setup in my opinion than a twin turbo setup. But it depends on the application too, what you're doing with the car and what your overall goal is. So
what other questions you guys have for us? We'll pull this back up. I see a couple of them coming through. What's your opinion on a 2JZ swap for a Toyota Tacoma?
That'd be awesome.
what do you think about that?
What was that Tacoma running at the track the other day?
It's been done. I'm all for it. I mean, I drive a pickup truck on the daily, so I mean, I could definitely use a faster pickup truck. But I don't know. Two J's are awesome. It's kind of Japanese version of the small block Chevy. So I don't know. I'm all for putting those things in everything. What the heck?
My phone just died, so
They're a little heavy, but
You got your phone, Mickey?
I have my phone. Yeah.
Alright, check that out. I'm gonna plug this in.
We're gonna check some more of the comments here. Just hold up a second, guys.
Maybe, yeah. I did see someone comment on the diesel topic saying that fuel economy doesn't always go out the window in diesel applications when you do bigger turbos. That's why I didn't speak up, because I don't know anything about those things.
Yeah, I don't know much about diesel application either. I mean, I guess it's more, as Mickey said, I think the bigger the turbo gets, the more your right foot tends to step on the gas and enjoy the experience a little bit more.
What other questions you got?
Well, I need to find that.
That was it?
No, it wasn't. That was the old one. There we go. Sorry, guys. Still pulling up the questions here.
Rick, I got it. Hold on. Rick, you're a Porsche guy, right? Thoughts on built NA motors versus 964, 993 turbos? I've heard they're a little harder to handle the boost on turns.
Sure. So 964 turbos are scary. They're definitely more in line with like the old 930 turbos, like the old 911 turbos. And those cars were notoriously called the Widowmakers. Main reason is that there's a lot of turbo lag. So typically single turbo application, you could be going around a turn, right? And then midway around the turn, boost could kick in, you lose the back end of the car, and you're out. 993s were much better. I've driven a 993 turbo. I'd say that it's much more in line with the modern day turbos. Less turbo lag. It's also four-wheel drive, which helps quite a bit. As far as a 964 goes, bang for the buck, because these Porsches are so expensive to modify. Bang for the buck, I would say go either TPC Supercharger Kit or a turbo kit if you can find one. They're pretty hard to find these days. Building high horsepower NA out of a 3.6 liter, building it out to 3.8 or 4 liters, you're looking at $30,000 to $40,000. So, if you can pick up a TPC Supercharger kit for $7,500, $7,500 to add to bolt on 100 horsepower, that's the way I would go all day, every day.
I like to see that. Opinions on a rotary engine swap in the Porsche.
Oh, that's pretty cool. All right, so I don't know. I think that's pretty much all the topics we had to cover today. You have another question?
Yeah, I know we need to cut this, but somebody did ask, can you put a turbo on a non-turbo engine without problems? And we did touch on this right at the beginning of this segment, but just to reiterate, because this is a popular question that we get from a lot of our fans. Yes, of course, you can turbocharge a naturally aspirated engine. Is it ideal? Probably not, but it can be done, and the kits out there exist. Obviously, lowering the compression and a lot of things we talked about, like the clutch and transmission. Some of those things may not be up to the task if you're trying to push a lot of horsepower. So yes, you can turbocharge an NA motor, and there are tons of kits out there for most cars if you can do it, or you can piece one together. But typically you're better off turbocharging a car that's turbo from the factory, because they've basically overbuilt the parts to handle the horsepower that it's producing as they sell it to you. They'll likely handle the power you're going to push through it unless you go overboard.
Yeah, that's a good point. We didn't really talk about turbo kits for cars that came from the factory turbocharged. And there's a lot of those nowadays, right? Like you got your WRXs, exactly. So I mean, all of these cars came from the factory turbocharged. It really.
So I would call it turbo upgrades. It's not like turbocharging; it's already turbocharged.
Right.
So like upgrading the turbo kit on your already turbocharged car.
Yeah. And honestly, as Mickey alluded to, it's much easier starting with the turbo platform. You don't have to deal with a lot of the stuff that you have to deal with on an NA car, because the car's already kind of set up for it. That said, before you go and upgrade a turbo kit, make sure that your factory turbo and stuff can't support your power objectives, your power goals. Like a lot of these cars come from the factory pretty detuned. So, you know, you hook up a Cobb or one of these piggybacks and crank up the boost a bit, and you may get plenty of power. I mean, perfect example of this is the BMWs, like the 135i's, the 335i's, right? You buy, those cars came from the factory at 300 horsepower, so they weren't a slouch by any means. But they could definitely use some more power. Well, pick up a JB4, a pop-in intake, and a downpipe, and you're over 400 wheel horsepower on stock turbos, and you really don't lose a lot of that reliability.
So basically what you're saying is they're detuned.
Exactly.
And these parts bring out, you know,
And it's the same way.
detune and maximize the performance that it is capable of and can be driven like that daily, but it just isn't given to you that way from the factory because you're not killing yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's the same way for Evos, WRXs, Focus RSs.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a slew of them. So
Really, any car with forced induction from the factory, there's usually some potential there. I mean, even those like Mini Coopers with the superchargers, you know, just chipping those and putting on a smaller supercharger pulley can result in a lot more power.
All right, guys, I think we're gonna wrap it up here. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Please hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and hit the like button. That'll help this channel and this video kind of spread. And we want that, and we want to keep producing more and more videos for you guys. So hit the subscribe button. We'll see you guys on Tuesday, right? Tomorrow.
Yeah,
for another video.
Let us know in the comments what you guys want to talk about for future lives. We want to keep doing this for you guys, but we want to make sure the content is what you want to see and hear. So let us know.